The courtroom fell silent as the judge called forward the only eyewitness to the double murder, trembling 3-year-old girl who hadn't spoken a single word since the night her parents were killed. 2 suspects stood waiting. No one knew the truth, and no one was prepared for what happened next. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. They were known in their neighborhood as the kind of family everyone admired, quiet, hardworking, always smiling. On the night everything changed, their small home glowed softly under the streetlights, a picture of calm that shattered in seconds. The police later described the break-in as swift and calculated, carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Neighbors heard nothing, no screams, no struggle, only the distant sound of shattered glass. When officers arrived, they found the parents lifeless, the room overturned, and the air heavy with smoke from a failed attempt to set part of the house on fire. And then, beneath the dining table, they discovered her, the couple's 3-year-old daughter, curled into a tiny ball, shaking silently. She hadn't cried. She hadn't spoken. Her wide eyes told officers she had seen everything, and lost everything in a single night with no other witnesses. She became the key to finding the killer. In the days that followed, detectives tried everything to reach the little girl, but each attempt ended the same way: silence. She would sit motionless, clutching a small blanket taken from the crime scene, her eyes drifting somewhere far beyond the room. Doctors confirmed what the officers feared. The trauma had locked her voice away. She understood them, but she could not bring herself to speak. Investigators were stuck. 2 men had been arrested, both tied to the victims in different ways, both with motives that couldn't be ignored. But without evidence, without a witness, the case was slipping through their fingers. A child psychologist suggested an unusual solution: bring the girl into a controlled courtroom session, surrounded by familiar faces and gentle guidance. Maybe in that quiet space she might react. Point, gesture, anything. It was a desperate hope. But at this point, hope was all they had. The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning, as if the walls themselves sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Reporters waited with pens frozen mid-air, officers stood in rigid silence, and the judge watched over the room with a heaviness in his eyes. Today was different. Today, a 3-year-old child would determine the fate of 2 men. The suspects were brought in separately, but the contrast between them was striking. The first sat with an unsettling stillness, his expression unreadable, almost confident. His eyes barely blinked as he surveyed the room, as though he already knew the outcome. The second shifted nervously in his seat, his hands trembling, his breaths unsteady. He insisted over and over that he was innocent, but his words dissolved into the tense air. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Everyone knew one of these men had brutally ended 2 lives. Everyone also knew one of them didn't deserve to be here at all. The judge finally called for the little girl. Gasps whispered across the room as she appeared, tiny, fragile, clutching her blanket. Her steps hesitant. As she entered, the entire courtroom leaned forward, holding its breath. Whatever happened next would change everything. Every eye in the courtroom followed the little girl as she stood before the judge, her tiny fingers gripping the edge of her blanket. The silence was so deep it felt like the room had stopped breathing. An officer gently knelt beside her, pointing toward the 2 suspects. "Sweetheart, do you recognize either of these men?" he asked softly. The girl didn't move. Her gaze drifted over the courtroom, past the judge, past the audience, past the trembling suspect who pleaded for his innocence. It was as if she wasn't looking at people, but through them, everyone waited for her to point at a suspect. A gesture, a nod, anything. But then, something no one expected happened. Her small hand slowly lifted, but not toward the suspects. Not even toward the judge or lawyers. She pointed across the room, straight at the police K-9 sitting calmly beside the officers. A ripple of confusion spread instantly. Murmurs scattered across the benches. The judge frowned, unsure what this meant. The officers exchanged puzzled glances. The little girl took a shaky step toward the dog, her eyes filling with a strange mix of fear and recognition. No one understood. Not yet? But something enormous had just shifted. The officers hesitated as the girl stepped closer to the K9, her breath trembling. She reached out with a shaking hand, touched the dog's fur, and leaned forward. No one could hear what she whispered. Her voice was barely dust in the air. But the moment the dog listened, something in him changed. His calm posture vanished. The K9's ears snapped upward. His body stiffened, muscles coiling as if a silent alarm had gone off inside him. A low, rumbling growl rose from his chest, not wild, not uncontrolled, but deliberate, focused. Whispers erupted instantly. What's happening? Why is he reacting like that? Did she say something? The dog turned away from the girl and began walking. Slowly, methodically, toward the suspects. Every footstep echoed through the courtroom like a ticking bomb. First, he approached the nervous suspect. The man froze, eyes wide. The dog sniffed him once, brief, uninterested, and moved on. Then he stopped in front of the other man. The one who had sat still, expression unreadable. The one who hadn't flinched since entering the room. The K9's growl deepened, louder, sharper, accusing. Gasps shot through the courtroom. Officers tensed, hands drifting toward their holsters. The dog had made his choice. And suddenly, everyone felt the truth closing in. Officers rushed back to the little girl, their voices gentle but urgent. She clung to her blanket, trembling, her eyes fixed on the man the K9 had singled out. One officer knelt beside her. Sweetheart, what did you tell the dog? Her lips quivered. For a moment, it seemed she might fall back into silence, but then, in the faintest whisper, she spoke. The bad man smelled like fire. Like Daddy's shirt? A stunned hush washed across the room. Fire. Investigators exchanged sharp glances. At the crime scene, the killer had tried to burn part of the house to destroy evidence. Only someone near the flames that night would still carry that scent. The K9, trained to detect accelerants, hadn't reacted to fear. He reacted to a chemical memory. Officers moved in closer, noticing faint residues on the suspect's jacket. The same accelerant found at the murder scene. The little girl hadn't pointed with her finger. She had pointed with the truth. The courtroom erupted into hurried motion as officers surrounded the suspect. His calm facade cracked for the first time, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes. One officer quickly radioed the forensic team stationed outside, ordering immediate field testing on the man's jacket. Within minutes, a technician rushed in, breathless, holding the results. They match, he announced. Same accelerant. Same chemical pattern from the crime scene. A wave of shock rolled through the room. The accused man lurched to his feet, shouting, denying everything, his voice cracking with desperation. But the K9 barked sharply, stepping forward as if confirming the truth itself. The second suspect sank into his chair, tears streaming, relief shaking through his entire body. Handcuff him, the judge commanded. As officers dragged the screaming man away. The weight of the moment settled on everyone present. Justice had finally found its mark. As the courtroom slowly emptied, the little girl remained standing near the witness stand, her blanket hanging loosely from her fingers. An officer approached gently, unsure if she would speak again. But she lifted her eyes, steady for the first time since the tragedy, and whispered, "Mama and Daddy can rest now." Tears filled the judge's eyes. Even the officers turned away to compose themselves. The K9 walked to her side, nudging her hand with quiet tenderness. She slipped her tiny arms around his neck, offering a fragile, grateful smile, for the first time since that terrible night. She felt safe,